I inherited $50 million from the father who abandoned us when I was 5. Now my mom, siblings, and extended family are suing me, claiming he was mentally unfit when he wrote the will. I, 34F, never expected to be in this position. My entire life, I've struggled with the abandonment of my father and the financial hardships that came with being raised by a single mother. Now, I find myself at the center of a legal battle that's tearing my family apart, all because of a man I barely knew. Some background: my father left when I was 5 years old. I have 2 older siblings, Jack, 38M, and Emma, 36F. Our mother, Sarah, 58F, was devastated but did her best to raise us on her own. We grew up in a small apartment, living paycheck to paycheck. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. Despite the hardships, we were a tight-knit family, supporting each other through thick and thin. I hadn't heard from my father in nearly 30 years. As far as I knew, he had started a new life somewhere else and forgotten about us entirely. That changed 6 months ago when I received a call from a lawyer informing me that my father had passed away. The shock of his death was nothing compared to what came next. The lawyer told me that I was the sole beneficiary of my father's estate, valued at approximately $50 million. To say I was stunned would be an understatement. How had he amassed such wealth? Why had he left it all to me and not to my siblings or mother? Why hadn't he reached out before his death? I was conflicted. On one hand, this inheritance could change my life in ways I'd never imagined. On the other, it felt tainted by years of abandonment and neglect. I decided to take some time to process the news before telling my family. That was my first mistake. 2 weeks after I learned about the inheritance, my mother called me in tears. She'd received a letter from my father's lawyer, explaining that he had passed and left his entire estate to me. She was hurt, confused, and angry. I tried to explain that I was just as surprised as she was, but she didn't seem to believe me. When I told my siblings, their reactions were even worse. Jack accused me of hiding the information from them, while Emma demanded to know why our father had chosen me over them. I honestly had no answers. Things escalated quickly from there. My mother and siblings began spreading the news to our extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins I barely knew. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion on what I should do with the money. Some suggested I split it evenly with my siblings. Others thought I should give a large portion to my mother as compensation for raising us alone. A few even hinted that I should share the wealth with the entire extended family. I was overwhelmed. This money, which I hadn't asked for or expected, was causing more problems than it solved. I tried to explain that I needed time to think, to figure out what to do. But my family's patience was wearing thin. About a month after the news broke, I received another call from the lawyer. My mother, siblings, and several extended family members were contesting the will. Their claim? That my father was mentally unfit when he wrote it. I was blindsided. How could they do this? We'd always been so close, supporting each other through everything. Now, because of money left by a man who had abandoned us, they were willing to drag me through a legal battle? The lawsuit has been ongoing for months now. The allegations from my family are getting increasingly nasty. They claim that I must have secretly reconnected with our father years ago, manipulating him into leaving me everything. They've accused me of elder abuse, of taking advantage of a man with diminished mental capacity. None of it is true, but the accusations hurt more than I can express. The worst part is the isolation. I've always relied on my family for support, but now I find myself alone. Friends have taken sides, with some believing the rumors spread by my family. I've had to hire security due to threats from distant relatives who believe I'm hoarding their money. As the legal battle drags on, I've been doing a lot of soul searching. Why did my father leave everything to me? I've racked my brain, trying to remember any interaction, any moment that might explain his decision. But there's nothing. Just a void where a father should have been. I've also been grappling with my own feelings about the money. Do I even want it? It feels tainted, not just by my father's abandonment, but now by the greed and anger of my family. Part of me wants to donate it all to charity, just to be rid of the burden. But another part feels that would be letting my family bully me into giving up what is legally mine. The lawsuit has forced me to dig into my father's past, to try and prove he was of sound mind when he wrote the will. In doing so, I've learned things about him that have only complicated my feelings further. It turns out that after leaving us, my father started several successful tech companies. He became wealthy in the late 90s during the dot-com boom. I've found old interviews where he talked about his business acumen and vision for the future. But in none of them did he ever mention having a family. I also discovered that he remarried about 10 years after leaving us. He had 2 more children with his new wife, both of whom are now in their early 20s. They've reached out to me, confused and hurt that their father left them nothing. I feel for them, I really do. They're experiencing the same sense of abandonment that I lived with for most of my life. The most shocking discovery came when I found my father's personal journals. His lawyer had them in storage and released them to me as part of the legal proceedings. Reading them has been an emotional roller coaster. In the early entries, shortly after he left us, my father writes about feeling trapped and overwhelmed by family life. He describes the guilt of leaving, but also the sense of freedom he felt. It's hard to read his justifications for abandoning us, especially knowing the struggles we went through. As the years go on, his entries become more reflective. He writes about regret, about missing milestones in our lives. There are pages filled with things he wished he could tell us, apologies he never had the courage to make in person. The later entries are the hardest to read. He writes about wanting to reconnect but feeling like too much time had passed. He was afraid we would reject him, that we would never forgive him for leaving. There are dozens of drafted letters to each of us, none of which were ever sent. In his final years, he writes a lot about me specifically. He had apparently been following my career from afar. I'm a child psychologist, specializing in helping kids deal with parental abandonment. The irony is not lost on me. He writes about being proud of the work I'm doing, how it shows strength and empathy despite the pain he caused. The last entry, dated just a week before he died, explains his decision to leave everything to me. He writes that he sees it as a form of karmic justice, that his money should go to the child who seemed to have transcended the pain he caused and was working to help others. He hoped that I would use the money to expand my work and help even more children. Reading these journals has left me an emotional wreck. I'm angry at him for thinking money could make up for a lifetime of absence. I'm sad for the relationship we never had. I'm frustrated that he didn't have the courage to reach out before he died. And I'm overwhelmed by the responsibility he's placed on me with this inheritance. The legal case is still ongoing. My family's lawyers are arguing that these journals prove my father's mental instability. They claim that his guilt and regret led him to make an irrational decision, ignoring his current family, wife and younger kids, as well as my mother and siblings. I'm torn about how to proceed. On one hand, I understand my family's pain. They're hurt, just as I was, by our father's actions. The money feels like a final insult to them, a reminder of all he could have provided but chose not to. On the other hand, I can't help but feel betrayed by their actions. We've always been there for each other. How can they so quickly turn to lawsuits and character assassination? Even if I wanted to share the money, their behavior makes me hesitant. Would giving them what they want just be rewarding their tactics? I've tried to have conversations with them outside of the legal proceedings, but it hasn't gone well. My mother refuses to speak to me directly, saying everything needs to go through the lawyers. Jack has become hostile, accusing me of tearing the family apart for my own gain. Emma is slightly more receptive, but she's clearly conflicted, torn between her love for me and her feeling that the inheritance division is unfair. The extended family is even worse. I've received countless messages from people I barely know, some pleading for money, others making thinly veiled threats. It's reached the point where I've had to change my phone number and email address. I've also had to take a leave of absence from work. The stress of the lawsuit, combined with the emotional toll of learning about my father's life, has left me struggling to focus on my patients. I worry about the children I was helping, but I know I can't effectively support them when my own life is in such turmoil. As the case drags on, I find myself wondering more and more about what my father truly wanted. Was leaving everything to me really an attempt at redemption? Or was it a final, selfish act, a way to assuage his guilt without having to face us in person? I've considered reaching out to his widow and my half-siblings. Part of me feels they deserve some of the inheritance, as they actually knew him as a father. But I worry that contacting them would only complicate the legal situation further. Some days, I find myself wishing he had never left us the money. We were doing fine without it. We had our struggles, sure, but we had each other. Now, with the promise of wealth dangling between us, it feels like we've lost something far more valuable than money. I've started seeing a therapist to help me navigate these complex emotions. She's been helpful in getting me to confront my unresolved feelings about my father's abandonment. We're working through the anger, the sadness, and the lingering sense of unworthiness that his actions instilled in me. One thing my therapist suggested was writing letters to each family member, expressing my feelings about the situation. I don't intend to send these letters, at least not while the lawsuit is ongoing, but the exercise has been cathartic. It's helped me clarify my own thoughts and feelings about the inheritance and the family conflict. In my letter to my mother, I found myself expressing a deep sense of gratitude for all she did for us, mixed with hurt that she seems to have so quickly turned against me. I want her to know that no amount of money could ever replace the love and support she gave us growing up. To Jack, my letter is filled with memories of him protecting me as a kid, of looking up to him. I want to remind him of the bond we shared, to ask how we can possibly let money destroy that. Emma's letter is perhaps the hardest to write. We've always been close, and the distance between us now feels unbearable. I want to reminisce about our late-night talks, our shared dreams. I want to ask her if she really believes I would intentionally hurt her this way. As for the extended family, my letters are shorter, filled with confusion and a bit of anger. I want to ask them how they can feel entitled to money from a man most of them never even met. Writing these letters has made me realize how much I miss my family. Despite the pain they're causing me now, they're still the people who shaped me, who supported me for most of my life. The idea of losing them forever over this inheritance is heartbreaking. I've also been thinking a lot about what to do with the money if I do end up keeping it. My father's journals suggest he hoped I'd use it to help children, and that idea resonates with me. I've considered setting up a foundation to support children of absent parents, providing therapy, educational support, and other resources. But then I worry, would creating such a foundation feel like a betrayal to my family? Would it seem like I'm publicly airing our family drama? And do I even have the right to use this money for my own projects when my siblings and mother are struggling? The whole situation has made me acutely aware of how money can change people, how it can bring out both the best and worst in us. I've seen friends and colleagues treat me differently since news of the inheritance got out. Some have become overly solicitous, while others seem to resent me for my sudden wealth. I've also been grappling with my own relationship with money. Growing up with financial instability has left its mark. Part of me wants to keep every penny, a reaction to all those years of scarcity. Another part feels immense guilt at having such wealth when so many, including my own family, are struggling. As the legal battle continues, I find myself at a crossroads. Do I continue to fight for what my father left me, even if it means permanently damaging my relationship with my family? Do I give in to their demands to keep the peace? Or is there some middle ground that I'm not seeing? I know that no matter what happens with the lawsuit, things will never be the same with my family. Too much has been said, too many hurtful accusations made. Even if we manage to reach a settlement, the trust between us has been shattered. Some days, I find myself wishing I could go back in time. Back to before I knew about the inheritance, when my biggest worry was paying off my student loans. Back to when my family was still my support system, not a group of adversaries. But I can't go back. All I can do is try to move forward, to make the best decision I can with the information I have. I have to find a way to honor my father's wishes, as complicated as my feelings towards him may be, while also staying true to my own values. As I write this, I'm no closer to a solution. The lawsuit continues, my family remains estranged, and I'm left holding a fortune that feels more like a burden than a blessing. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that whatever happens, my life will never be the same. If you've made it this far, thank you for reading. I guess I'm putting this out there in hopes of gaining some perspective. Has anyone else dealt with a sudden inheritance tearing their family apart? How do you navigate family relationships when large sums of money are involved? And how do you honor the wishes of a parent who was absent for most of your life? Any advice or insights would be appreciated. I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of legal jargon and family drama, and I could really use a lifeline. Update. It's been 2 months since my last post, and I wanted to share some developments. After much soul-searching and discussions with my therapist, I decided to reach out to my family directly, bypassing the lawyers. I wrote heartfelt letters to my mom and siblings, expressing my love for them and my desire to find a resolution that wouldn't destroy our relationships. To my surprise, Emma responded. We met for coffee last week, our first face-to-face conversation in months. It was tense at first, but as we talked, I saw glimpses of the sister I've always been close to. She admitted that the lawsuit had taken a toll on her too, and she was beginning to question whether it was worth it. This small breakthrough gave me hope. I've now proposed family mediation as an alternative to the ongoing lawsuit. My lawyer wasn't thrilled, but I feel it's the right path forward. I've also made a decision about the money. Regardless of the outcome, I plan to donate a significant portion to create a foundation supporting children of absent parents. It feels like the right way to honor the complicated legacy my father left behind. The road ahead is still uncertain, but for the first time in months, I feel a glimmer of hope. I'll keep you updated as things progress. Thank you all for your support and advice. It's meant more than you know.